On my birthday, my parents didn't bring out a cake. They brought out witnesses. Nearly 100 relatives seated neatly watching as my father slid a folder across the table like a contract. Inside was a bill almost $250,000 for the cost of raising me. My mother quietly tore my photos off the wall. My sister reached for my car keys and said Dad had already signed them over. Then my boss stood up and fired me on the spot. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I walked out in silence. Before I tell you how that silence turned into something they never expected, tap like and tell me where you're listening from. And if your family ever tried to break you like this, your words might help more than you know. My name is Amanda. I'm in my early 30s, and for most of my life I was the child my family didn't quite know what to do with. I wasn't loud enough to be impressive. I wasn't fragile enough to be protected. I learned early that in our house, love was quiet, conditional, and usually came with strings attached. From the outside, my family looked flawless. Big house, long driveway, holiday dinners that felt more like photo shoots. Neighbors whispered about how lucky we were. Inside, everything ran on unspoken rules. My father, Richard, believed money was proof of worth. My mother, Elaine, believed silence was the same thing as peace. And my younger sister, Lena, learned very young that being adored was a skill, and she mastered it. Growing up, I was the reliable one, the one who fixed things. When the internet went down before a party, I handled it. When bills piled up or accounts got messy, I quietly sorted them out. I never asked questions. I never asked for credit. I thought that was what being part of a family meant, showing up even when no one noticed. The photos on the wall told a different story. Lena's smile was everywhere. Graduation, vacations, framed moments frozen in gold. My pictures were fewer, tucked into corners, easily replaceable. I noticed, but I told myself it didn't matter. I had my own life, my own career. I paid my own rent. I drove my own car. Independence felt like safety. That night, the night of the dinner, I arrived straight from work, still in my jacket. Sensible shoes. I remember pausing in the entryway, adjusting my bag on my shoulder, listening to the hum of conversation spill out into the hall. Laughter, glasses clinking. My name floated through the air once or twice, followed by polite smiles. My mother barely looked at me when I walked in. She was busy smoothing her dress, making sure everything looked perfect. My father was already in host mode, shaking hands, telling stories. Lena stood near the center of it all, glowing confident like she belonged there in a way I never quite did. I told myself it was just a birthday dinner, that I was overthinking it. Families get awkward. People say the wrong things. I took my seat, folded my hands in my lap, and waited. I didn't know yet that this wasn't a celebration. It was a setup. Dinner began the way these things always did, perfectly timed, perfectly staged. Plates appeared all at once. Wine was poured without anyone asking. Conversations overlapped just enough to sound warm, but not enough to feel real. I smiled when someone caught my eye. I nodded when an aunt complimented the house. Inside, something felt off, like a low vibration under the table. Halfway through the main course, my mother stood up. She didn't tap her glass. She didn't make a speech. She walked to the wall behind me where the framed photos hung in a neat grid. Family trips, holiday mornings, Lena at every milestone, and then, without a word, she reached up and lifted one frame off the hook. It was a photo of me. Just me. I was 16, sunburned, laughing at something out of frame. The sound it made when she pulled it down wasn't loud. A soft scrape, paper against drywall. She set it face down on the sideboard and returned to her seat like nothing had happened. No one reacted. That's what made it worse. My father cleared his throat. The room quieted, not because he asked for attention, but because he was used to being obeyed. He smiled the way he did when he thought he was being generous. "Amanda," he said, sliding a leather folder across the table toward me. "We've been meaning to talk." It was heavy, too heavy for paper alone. I opened it slowly, aware of every eye in the room. Inside was a single sheet. Itemized. Neat. Bills, payments, years tallied into one final number, rounded but precise enough to sting. Just under $250,000 for everything we spent raising you, he continued. School, food, housing, all of it. My ears rang. Someone laughed nervously. I couldn't tell who. This isn't punishment, he added. It's accountability. You're an adult. Adults settle their debts. I looked up at him, at my mother who stared at her plate, at my sister who didn't look surprised at all. And if you can't, my father said, lowering his voice just enough to sound reasonable, then we should probably take some space. No more contact until this is resolved. That was the moment it clicked. This wasn't about money. It wasn't even about control. It was about erasing me and calling it responsibility, turning love into a ledger, turning my existence into a failed investment they could finally write off. My hands were steady when I closed the folder. My heart wasn't. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Because before I could even stand, my sister leaned forward, her fingers already brushing something cold and metallic on the table. And that's when the dinner stopped pretending to be polite. My sister didn't rush. She never does. Lena has always understood timing better than anyone in that room. Her hand slid across the table, slow and deliberate, until her fingers closed around my car keys. The soft clink of metal was louder than any toast that night. She didn't look at me right away. She turned the keyring once, watching it catch the light, then smiled like she was being generous. Dad already transferred the title this morning, she said, calm, almost bored. You weren't really using it the way the family intended anyway. I stared at the keys for half a second longer than necessary. That car wasn't luxury. It wasn't flashy. It was just mine. Or at least I thought it was. Something I used to get to work, to live my life. I realized then how carefully they'd planned this. Even my independence had been rented. Before I could respond, my father gestured toward the far end of the table. That brings us to the last point, he said, like he was wrapping up a meeting. That's when I saw my manager standing near the doorway, Mark. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. His hands were clasped too tight in front of him, eyes darting anywhere but at me. I didn't know he'd be here, I heard myself think, even though part of me already knew. Mark cleared his throat. Amanda, he said, voice unsteady. Based on some concerns that were brought to my attention tonight, we've decided to let you go, effective immediately. No paperwork, no office, no warning. Just a sentence delivered over dinner like an afterthought. The room stayed quiet. 100 people watching to see what I'd do, waiting for the scene, the tears, the begging. Something they could remember later and feel justified about. But nothing came. I felt hollow for exactly 3 seconds. Then something else settled in. Heavy, solid, clear. I stood up slowly, pushed my chair in, picked up the folder and slipped it into my bag like it was nothing more than mail. I looked at my father. He was smiling relieved like he'd finally cut a bad deal. I looked at my mother. She was studying her napkin. I looked at Lena dangling my keys from one finger already victorious. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out. The gravel crunched under my shoes as I crossed the driveway alone. No one followed. No one called my name. By the time I reached the street, the house behind me was already closing ranks. I didn't know where I was going yet. I just knew I wasn't going back. I didn't go somewhere dramatic after I left. No airport, no friend's couch, no crying in a parking lot. I walked, 3 miles give or take, past quiet houses with porch lights on, past sprinklers ticking like metronomes, past couples laughing inside kitchens that smelled like dinner and normal lives. The longer I walked, the more the shock drained out of my body and left something colder behind. By the time I reached my apartment, my feet hurt and my hands were steady. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to. I dropped my bag on the chair, set the folder on my desk, and opened my laptop. The screen blinked to life, that familiar dark background and blinking cursor. This was the only place that still made sense. I'm a cybersecurity analyst. My job isn't revenge. It's pattern recognition. It's finding what doesn't belong. It's following trails people assume are invisible, and my family had always been terrible at hiding their trails. I started small, old payments I'd helped manage over the years. Bills I'd covered temporarily, transfers my father had explained away as timing issues or accounting quirks. At the time, I'd trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was my father. Families don't audit each other, but systems don't lie. They just wait. Within an hour, the first pattern appeared. Money moving in neat, repeated amounts. Not chaotic, not accidental. Monthly transfers from relatives who believed they were investing in something safe, something managed by Richard because he understood finance. I recognized the names immediately. My Uncle Paul, my Aunt Helen. Good people, careful people. The kind who still mailed birthday cards with handwritten notes. The money didn't go where it was supposed to. It pooled briefly, then moved again. Out. Always out. To an account tied to expenses that had nothing to do with investments. Luxury rentals, designer charges, flights, hotels, lifestyle spending. Lena's lifestyle. My stomach didn't drop. It hardened. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. This wasn't just favoritism. This wasn't just cruelty. This was something else, something heavier, something with consequences. My phone buzzed on the desk. Once. Then again. I didn't touch it. I didn't have to look to know who it was. I kept working. I didn't break into anything. I didn't access anything I wasn't legally allowed to see. I only organized what already existed. I compiled timelines, matched amounts, labeled payments and bills the way they actually functioned, not the way my father described them. By the time the sun started creeping up through the blinds, the story was complete, and it was ugly. I saved everything, backed it up, took a breath. That's when I finally checked my phone. Dozens of missed calls, messages stacked on top of each other. My mother's number, my father's, Lena's, then Mark's. Mark's message was short and panicked. He said he needed to talk, that there had been a misunderstanding, that he'd been pressured, that maybe we could work something out. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my contacts and found the number I'd been hoping I wouldn't need. The regional director. The woman who'd approved my last project. The one who'd stayed calm while everyone else panicked during a security incident last year. She answered on the second ring. "Amanda," she said. "It's late." "I know," I said. "I won't take long. I was terminated tonight. Not through HR. Not through any formal process. It happened at a private family event." Silence. "And my manager," I continued, based that decision on personal information provided by my parents without verifying anything. The silence deepened, changed texture. "Give me 5 minutes," she said. I made coffee while I waited. Black. Bitter. Familiar. 4 minutes later, an email arrived. Access restored. Termination reversed. Another followed, formal and precise. Mark was being placed on administrative leave pending review. I was instructed to take a day off and return the following week. I sat down slowly, coffee warming my hands. One pillar down. The phone buzzed again. This time I answered. It was my father. "Amanda," he said, voice tight. "You need to fix this. Now." I didn't break anything I said. "You sent something," he snapped. "People are asking questions." I organized information, I replied. "That's all." "You have no idea what you've done," he said. "I do," I said. "I finally do." He showed up at my apartment that afternoon. Not the man from the dinner party. No polished smile, no audience. Just a tired, angry man standing too close to my door. "Open it," he said. I cracked the door enough to see his face. "We did this for the family," he said quickly. "For stability, for legacy." "You invoiced me," I said, "in front of 100 people. That was a lesson," he said. "You needed perspective." "You used other people's money," I said, "and blamed me for existing." His eyes flicked away. Behind him, Lena hovered near the stairs. No confidence now, no glow, just fear she couldn't quite mask. "This doesn't have to go any further," my father said. "We can make it right. Not for you," I said. "For them." My phone rang again. This time it was my uncle. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He thanked me. "You didn't tear the family apart," he said quietly. "You showed us where the cracks were." My father heard it. His shoulders sagged like something inside him had finally snapped. "Please," he said. "Just stop." I looked at him, really looked, for the first time without wanting anything back. "You taught me that every action has a cost," I said. "This is yours." I closed the door. The fallout didn't take long. Accounts were frozen. Questions turned into investigations. Conversations happened without me in the room. The house that once felt untouchable suddenly wasn't. Lena lost everything she'd built on borrowed money. Sponsors disappeared. Invitations stopped coming. She tried calling me, then texting, then nothing. My mother sent one message, just one. It said, "I hope you're happy." I didn't respond. A week later, I sat at my desk at work. Same chair, same screen, different weight in my chest, lighter, cleaner. I deleted the folder from my laptop. Not because it wasn't important anymore, but because I didn't need to carry it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't managing their mess. I wasn't paying their bills. I wasn't fixing their systems. I was done. The consequences didn't arrive with sirens or headlines. They came quietly, the way real accountability usually does. My uncle and aunt took control of their finances. The payments stopped. Questions were asked, then more questions. The house that once felt permanent became provisional. Decisions were made without my parents at the center of them. That alone changed everything. Lena disappeared from the spotlight first. The trips stopped. The shopping stopped. People who used to orbit her found other places to be. She took a job she'd once joked was beneath her. I didn't celebrate it. I just noticed the silence where entitlement used to be. My father called less and less. When he did, his voice was smaller. No demands, no speeches. Just fragments of regret he couldn't quite shape into apologies. My mother sent a single message asking if we could talk someday. I didn't answer, not out of anger, out of clarity. At work, things settled into a new normal. My access stayed open. Projects moved forward. Colleagues treated me the same, which was its own kind of relief. I took a day off like I was told. I slept. I cooked. I sat with the quiet and let it be quiet. 4 days after the dinner, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Missed calls stacked up. Voicemails I didn't listen to. I turned the phone face down on the table and watched it buzz itself tired. That's when I understood what had really shifted. They no longer controlled the narrative. They no longer controlled me. I wasn't disowned. I was released. And for the first time, the space around me felt like my own. Here's what I learned. Family isn't the place where you're priced, audited, or threatened into obedience. Love doesn't come with invoices. And silence, when chosen, can be stronger than any argument. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever had to protect your future from the people who were supposed to protect you, share your experience in the comments. Your voice matters more than you think, and if you want to hear more stories like this, hit subscribe and stay with me. You're not alone.